this a little bit further away. Thanks for coming this evening. We appreciate your participation.
Good evening, everyone.
As we go along and we go through this presentation, please feel free to ask questions. Most importantly, we want everyone to be informed and knowledgeable about what we're about to present you. We put a lot of time into it, and we feel it's worth our while. That's why we're up here to present it to you. So I'm going to hand it over to Ted and Tracy.
Okay. For those of you that don't know, that's Mr. Guy Petro. He's school board president. So we thank him for coming, as well as anyone who's attended levy committee meetings who have been here. If you could just maybe raise your hand. I know there are quite a few in the audience that we've had. So appreciate that. We're going to go through a presentation today, and like Mr. Petro said, as we go through, you'll kind of see we have some pretty clearly defined sections. So when we get to the end of each section, you know, we'll kind of open it up for questions. So we're not going to make you sit there on a question the entire presentation. And we hope to have you out of here at a decent hour. We did the abridged version this morning at Chamber, and I guess it took half an hour, 40 minutes, so 45 minutes, depending on how many questions you have. So I want to start off with just a couple pictures here, and we know why you're all here. We're here to talk about the issue that's going to be on the ballot in November. But the first thing you saw when you pulled onto our campus and walked into our building is this. And it's a collage of our kids. So when you walk in the first door, that's what we're about here. We're all about kids. And these are just some of the things that our kids have accomplished in the last 6 months. They took a trip to D.C. We had the Bands on the Round program. We had our kids have a career day here at the high school. All of these different things, kids participating in a speed cubing. I'm sorry, it's a little cut off at the bottom, but a speed cubing competition. Our kids are successful even after they graduate. These are two of our most recent success stories. If you haven't heard, one of our juniors this year, Samantha Ensinger, pictured up there in the top, actually helped the Freedom Historical Society redo their charter. So our kids are helping the community, and then I really felt bad for any restaurant that was in Garrettsville a few Sundays ago when they had the hot stove state championship down in Alliance. Because we went down there and it was 2 Garfield teams that were down there, and that has nothing to do with the schools. The reason I'm sharing this with you is if you were there, I felt bad for the restaurants because there had to be no one left in this town to eat. Everyone was there watching our kids. It was pretty powerful. Our coaches were out at the center field fence kind of drooling over the talent that's coming up in the youth baseball. So it was pretty impressive to see. And most recently, you've seen Lauren Jones and how she's having success at Oklahoma. But very recently, we're extremely proud of this. One of Garfield's graduates, Isaac Russell, won the state competition in electricity. He's a Maplewood student, Garfield resident, won the state competition and was invited to Louisville, Kentucky in late June. And in Louisville, Kentucky, he competed against 6,600 other students and finished first nationally. His teacher, a Garfield grad, Joe Savanovic. So very, very impressive. Our schools do a lot of great things for kids, and our kids are very successful. To continue that, we're here to talk about the point in time where we're at now. We need to share with you our current financial situation, where we're at. We're going to put some graphs up and explain them to you. And this is the slogan that the committee for this tax issue has come up with, G-Men Unite. Keep our community, schools, and future bright. So you're going to be seeing that everywhere. This is our current financial situation. The black bar represents our total revenue. The gray bar are the total expenditures, everything that we spend. The pink that you'll see here, and we're going to talk about this at length, is in 2004, which is the last time we asked the community for new funds. In 2004, the board approved a $5.25 million emergency operating levy. So every 5 years, we go back to the community and ask them to renew that. That was in 2004. The red represents In 2019, we're going to need to be back on the ballot to ask the community to approve that. And we show this because you can see that even with that renewal, it doesn't help solve our problem. The yellow represents our cash balance, and you can see we go into the negative in fiscal year 2020. So that's our current financial situation. And I can share with you, when I took this position 5 years ago, Mr. Klamer, the former superintendent, the board, I think, was really smart in providing us a number of days that we could work together. So we worked together, and he shared with me 3 things that we would need to do straight out of the gates. The first thing was pass the renewal. That was 2013. Okay, we needed to get that passed and renew it. It wasn't a new tax, but we needed to get it renewed. It would be on the ballot. The second thing he shared was we needed to get our students out of Park Avenue, because that building was extremely expensive to have our kids, 2 grade levels of our kids, it was 5, 6 at that time, across town. So we would bus them over there in the morning, another bus would go over and pick them up in the afternoon, bring them back. It was problematic. It was difficult to share staff back and forth from 2 grade levels. So he said we needed to get out of there because that cost us a significant amount of money. And the third thing he shared was that in the next 18 months, we would need to be on the ballot for new money. That was in 2013. So we accomplished the first 2, and the third thing, we've been able, through doing things like this, to push that down the road as far as we can. So it's not that we just forgot about going out for new money, or we didn't do it because, you know, this magic sum of money suddenly appeared. We've made some really difficult decisions. And some of the things I'm going to share with you today in this chart here, they're things that you may not know about because they're not things that we publicize. They're difficult decisions that we've made that have impacted great people, great employees, you know, who have left and not been replaced. So it's not something that we enjoy doing. It's the most difficult part of our job, but that's making reductions and consolidating. Very difficult to do. So the first thing that I want to talk about is when we started to share this problem with staff and let them know that we were about to get into levy or tax issue planning mode. Both of our unions, we have 2 unions here in Garfield, the teachers union and OPSI union that represents the bus drivers, custodians, secretaries, cafeteria staff. They approached us, approached the board, and said, to assist, we would like to roll our contracts over and not have any negotiated increases for 2018, 2019. It's one thing to ask your employees to do that. It's another thing for them to step forward and tell you that they're willing to do that, to help. So they did that. That was a savings, you can see, of $73,000 just over. Over the last 5 years, we've reduced 16 full-time staff members. The number I'm showing you here is only the savings to insurance costs, because we're not offering insurance plans to part-time individuals. So we've reduced 16 full-time staff members at a savings of $336,000. Moving forward, that's $336,000 annually. We refinanced the bond issue twice. That was a savings of over $642,000. And we pursue grants as they come out. We apply for so many grants, and you can see here that our total has come to over $5 million. So in the last 5 years, we've reduced expenditures by over $6 million to try to keep this tax issue as low as possible and make every dollar stretch as far as we can. Are there any questions about our current financial state? Or Tracy, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I guess I would just like to say that as you're looking at the graph that we showed earlier where the cash balance is going into a negative cash balance, that is something that as a school district we're not allowed to do. We have to forecast 5 years out. The state comes in and has already asked what our plan is in order to bring revenue and expenditures in line and bring that cash balance up. And we presented to them that we were going to ask for an issue on the ballot in November of 2018. But from that point forward, if we were not able to pass that issue, then more steps would be taken moving forward with the Department of Education becoming involved, you know, in helping us bring that in line, so.
And I'll be real candid with you. When Tracy says the Ohio Department of Education is going to come in and help us, that's not the help that we want. We want to be able to run our school district. We want our community to be able to have some input on how this is done. So we want to talk to you about the Garfield value, and this is something that really resonated. We're sharing with you what really stuck out to the committee that we had come in. And one measure that the state uses to look at how to compare districts to one another financially is how much they're spending per pupil per year. They call that your district's per pupil expenditure. And in this graph, you can see the yellow on the right is the statewide average. Statewide, districts spend $11,603 per student per year. Another thing the Ohio Department of Education does is they group districts in what they call similar districts. So they put us in a cohort. I believe Champion is in our cohort, Southeast is in our cohort. There are other districts down south that you've probably never heard of. And what they do is they group you into districts that have the similar demographic, similar income, similar poverty, similar size, whether you're rural or urban. So they group you in districts that look as similar to you as they can. And when you compare us to those districts, they spend almost $11,000, $10,927. Garfield does it for $98.87. So we spend very little, but that's because we get very little. So our per pupil expenditure is very low. It's a good value. A lot of questions have come up about open enrollment, and that's what we're going to get into now. We thought maybe two of the best ways to demonstrate how open enrollment impacts what Garfield's able to do is by taking this graph and pulling out our open enrollment students. So what would happen if we pulled them out? And this is what happens to our costs. Again, those two on the right, the statewide average and the similar districts, they remain the same. Our costs to do business, if we have to maintain our fixed cost, which we would, it puts us at almost $12,000 per student, significant increase. So we thought we'd give you a graphic to show you how open enrollment works. So if you think, and we're just giving you one example, every classroom, every grade level is going to be different based on how many residential students, which are the students who live in Garfield, how many residential students we have in that grade to divide up into classrooms. Okay? And we monitor that on a monthly basis. We report that to the board on what enrollment looks like at each grade level, and we look at class sizes. So in this example, we took all of our fixed costs, a teacher, the heat, the electricity, the books for all subjects, desks, custodians, and principals. And when we purchase these things, we purchase them for a maximized classroom, which is 25. And we need to do that because if we have a Garfield resident class that allows us to fill the classroom to capacity, we have to have 25 sets of books, 25 desks. The custodian, it doesn't really impact them. They need to clean the room, whether or not there are 19, 20, or 25 kids in there. So those are all of our fixed costs. And when you add them up in this example, we're going to say it's $247,175 to run this classroom for a year. And in this example, you can see we have 19 students in this classroom, okay? And we have 6 empty desks. If you take that $247,175, divide it by 19 students, it gives us a per pupil expenditure of about $13,000. What open enrollment does is this. Clicker's not working. There we go. So our fixed costs remain the same. And a big question has come up, why don't open enrollment students have to pay? Why can't we tax the open enrollment students? State law prohibits us. We cannot tax an open enrollment students. Those parents, if they're open enrolled from a neighboring district, are still paying the taxes to their home district, but none of it's going to their student. The state, we receive from the state $6,020 for each open enrollment student that comes. So we take those fixed costs that were $247,000. They don't increase because we have an extra student sitting in that room. okay? What we do get is $6,020 for every one of those students, and it helps us to close that gap and maximize our efficiency. So essentially, we're maximizing a production line, if you think of it that way. So we take the 247, 175, divide it by 25, it brings our per pupil cost down to that $9,000 range that you were seeing in the first graph. Does that help you understand how we use the open enrollment? Now, where it starts to get expensive, and we monitor it very carefully and we don't let it get there in Garfield, is by looking at open enrollment and saying, okay, are we to the point where if we added an open enrollment student that we would have to add a teacher? Because what does that do to your fixed costs? Drives them up. So we monitor it very closely by grade level to make sure that we're using open enrollment to fill the empty seats that we don't have room for in Garfield, but with our Garfield students. Okay, so we use it to maximize efficiency. Any questions on the finances or open enrollment? Yeah, Kristen, it's a great question, and it's one that we've received a lot, and it comes down to the fact that when you do open enrollment, you cannot charge a fee. There's tuition that can be charged that is different from open enrollment. Yeah, but the tuition fee is established by the state of Ohio, not the district. They determine what that rate is, and you have to choose one or the other. Are you going to be a tuition district, or are you going to be an open enrollment district? And I can tell you that, do you know what the tuition fee is this year? It's about $4,400 a year. If we were to turn to those 249 parents that fill these classrooms, I can tell you that we would see a significant drop in open enrollment, because those families would not be able to afford. So we're asking our local average taxpayer to pay an additional $320, and we would be asking those 249 student families to pay $4,400 per student. So a family of 3 open enrolled in the district would be paying over $13,000 to attend Garfield. Yes.
What we did is we had a performance audit done last fall, and the state auditors had gone around the state and looked at open enrollment and how it works in districts. I believe they picked 4 of them across the state, and 2, it was a profitable way to operate, and I believe the other 2, one was on the border and the other one was not doing well. So when they came in and did the performance audit, I said, I want you to look at this. This is something that's a big deal to us. So when you're looking at all of your costs, when you start getting into the per student amount, that fixed cost has to be taken into consideration. So when the auditors looked at it, we're operating at a profit. Open enrollment is bringing in an additional about $135,000 annually to the district. When you take all the revenue that comes in, all of the costs that we have to pay no matter what, plus the cost of educating a student, we have a positive balance.
So to directly answer your question, if you look at those fixed costs, the 247, that dollar amount needs to be spent on that classroom. For instance, we're not going to, if there are 19 kids in that classroom, we're not going to pay our custodian any less to clean it. We're not going to pay our teacher any less to teach 19 students. So the Yeah, and that's a great point. So there,
So if we talk about special services, if we bring a student into the district under open enrollment that qualifies for, special needs or special service, the state does have a program. It's called excess cost. So we can bill the neighboring district for the excess cost.
yeah, that's, Mr. Peter mentioned an important thing to note is when we have students leave our district, that money, the $6,020, flows to another district as well. So we also lose money that way. But I can tell you right now, our open enrollment out, the number of students going out, 49 students compared to 249 coming in. And I think you bring up a really great point, is all these students wanting something better. And when you look at a parent who is open enrolled at Garfield, they're cognizant enough to know that they look at the education that they have in their home district and they say they want something better. We do not transport them. So they're responsible for transporting their own children here. It's a service we don't provide. Our buses don't run out to all the districts. We transport Garfield students. So it's essentially a way of bringing in students. If you have to pay the $247, so in this option, if we cut open enrollment, you still pay the $247 as a community, and you get nothing extra. By bringing in 6 open enrollment students to this particular classroom, you bring in $36,000, and you have the same operating expenses. Okay? So, and there have been some questions about, well, we'll just eliminate all the open enrollment and reduce teachers. Well, we monitor it that closely that we're making sure we're not adding teachers by open enrolling students. We're bringing them in by the grade level and maximizing what we have. So if you eliminated a teacher due to open enrollment and you just took those Garfield students, our class sizes would balloon and become excessively large. It's a question in the back. Yes. Yeah, Jake. Minus the 36,000. Yeah, you're right. So we tried to paint like a worst case scenario. If you're not using that just to reduce it, I guess it would be reflected, Jake, in the, the per pupil, you're driving it down. Right, it would go down even further in that example. So. No, it goes to the general fund to offset those costs. We just didn't use it in this example. I think we had it up there once, and the numbers start to change, and you say, well, wait, I thought it was 247, and you lowered the cost to, 210. More powerful. Yeah. Good point. Thank you. So we haven't even broached the issue yet. Yeah, Mr. Conley.
Well, when you look at where we are in terms of finances, we're not going to get any more money from the state. We've pretty much leveled out there in terms of how we are equalizing our classrooms and utilizing open enrollment in a positive manner. Our residential enrollment continues to decline. So we're seeing that on the state side. There's also expenditures are always going to grow. Correct. Correct. I mean, we've gone since 2004. This has been 14 years, and I know that I go into a 5-year forecast, and we have meetings when we negotiate. And my whole job of forecasting is to show you what the trends are and where we're going. And based on those forecasts and looking at trends, we've changed the way that we operate on a number of different occasions so that we did not have to go back out to the community and ask for additional money. We're really out of ways to reinvent ourselves. When they came in and did the performance audit, we're bare bones. We're not carrying a lot of extra weight. We've consolidated everybody onto one campus. We're trying to maximize our efficiencies the best way we can. We are just at that point, which was going to happen eventually, where we need more money.
You know, Jason, to kind of summarize, and we were at the Record Courier today, and we actually took Chris Permy, who's the treasurer of the G-Men Unite, and he brought up a point that kind of said, hey, I don't know what diesel fuel cost 14 years ago, but I'm assuming it was less than it is today. And that's just one, you know, very minute but very concrete example of costs going up, and you're absolutely right. All of these things that we've done, if you remember, you know, Mr. Klamer said in the next 18 months, in 2013, we would be here. And here we are, almost in 2019, 5 years later, this has been able to just push it as far down the road as we can, not by avoiding it, but just trying to reduce costs within. So, yeah, we're just to the point we need more money.
Okay, Mr. Peter asked for the example of how the state used to subsidize busing. They actually used to give us a sum of money annually so that we could buy a new bus. When they gave us that money, I think the maximum amount we got was about $50,000. At the time, a bus probably cost you around $65,000, $70,000. A bus now can cost you anywhere from $90,000 to $100,000, and they give us no money for buses. We put $20,000 into a set-aside each year, and it takes us 5 years to get to $100,000 to buy a new bus. So you're constantly looking at maximizing efficiencies there as well, which you may have heard we've already changed around some bus routes. A lot of that has to do with the decline in residential enrollment and lower participation in transportation.
Okay, great questions. Thank you for asking. Yeah, we'll make sure we repeat your question so that everyone out in Facebook land that this is live streaming, they can hear it. So now that we've explained how open enrollment works, we're going to take you to the information that we started to share with our committee that we brought in. We know that the last time we had to be on the ballot in 2013, we were shocked, pleasantly shocked, at the support that we received. If you watch Channel 3, Channel 8 on Election Day, the day after Election Day, and you start to see results scroll in across the bottom, it is very, very rare that you see a number in the 70s in the approval rating. And even though this was a renewal and it wasn't a new issue, we passed like 74% approval. So we knew that the community supported us. And these are the things that we've been able to accomplish as a district in that time. We built a new building at the elementary school with a $5 million straight A grant. Didn't cost taxpayers anything. We brought the YMCA to the community so that Park Avenue wasn't sitting empty. And we have new services. With the help of the athletic boosters and the PTO and Charles Auto Family and numerous other businesses, we've been able to do some pretty special things, some things that needed to be done on this campus because our facilities were getting tired and non-compliant. It was getting difficult to insure our bleachers every year when they were wood. So we knew that had to be done. but did not want to go out and ask taxpayers to support something that would only impact the students that are in the band and playing athletically. So we did fundraising, and they helped us do that. The PTO helped put in an ADA compliant playground at the elementary school that would have taken us 10 years to do. With the help of the elementary PTO, we were able to do it in a few years. New gymnasium floor at Charles Auto Family. Our gym was, again, getting very tired. It needed refinished. Charles Auto Family came in and sponsored that gym floor and was able to help us get that done. Something that needed to be done, and we wouldn't be able to do it without the support of the community. And while all that was happening, we've really become one of the top performing districts, one of only 2 districts in the county that were recognized by U.S. News and World Report. We received a bronze rating, and I believe Aurora received a silver. So only one of 2 districts in the county to receive that. Very impressive. We offer a one-to-one technology for all of our students, give every student grades 6 through 12 a Chromebook. That's part of the Straight A grant, so that's sustained through there. We offer college credits. Then we started to look at what we know about taxes. And every time we do this presentation, I feel like putting the first bullet up there. What we know about taxes is no one likes them. No one likes new taxes. But like we said, we are to the point where we need additional funds. And we know that we haven't gone back and asked for new funds since 2004. We also know that funding schools with property tax has been ruled unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court 4 times since 1997. And they've done nothing. In fact, in 2002, they washed their hands of it. They've done nothing. So it became very clear to the committee that we did not want to sit around and wait for the state. After 20 years, they've done nothing. We don't think they're going to swoop in and fix our problem. We also know that Garfield's among the lowest property taxes in Portage County. We have the lowest effective millage voted in of all the districts in Portage County. We also know that we have that renewal levy coming up in 2019. So put a pin in that, because that's going to be important in our discussion, okay? We know that issue is going to come up for 2019. So knowing all of this, we needed feedback. We sent invitations out to about 50 community members. You saw the hands that went up here. There are many more that attend the meetings. We've been meeting since December. We've presented the information to them, and essentially we had 2 tasks. 1, help us uncover every rock imaginable. Is there anything that we are not seeing that we could use as a cost-saving measure? Is there anything that we're not seeing that could help us avoid this? Help us do what we need to do to keep the school strong. And if there's not, if we uncover every rock and there's not, what's the most responsible way for us to do this? Because the community trusts us. We shared that information on the last slide. There's a high level of trust and support. We work together well. We want to protect that. So we want to do this the right way. We shared all this information with them, and they got to a fork in the road. Late spring, they got to a fork in the road, April, May timeframe, okay? And they essentially said, well, we know property tax is unconstitutional and no one likes this property tax. Something new that we discovered was in 2006, so this was not available to us the last time we went out for new money. In 2006, the state allowed school districts to raise funds through income tax, okay? And we looked at they could do it earned income tax or traditional. And when we uncovered all of the demographic data, the age of our community, the number of landowners, the average income, we looked at that, and it became very evident that earned income was the way to go, because we have about almost 25%, little over 25% of our community senior citizens, and we wanted to make sure that we impacted the largest number of people the least, okay? They didn't feel, when they got to that fork in the road, that they were comfortable making a recommendation to the Board of Education, just a group of 50 people. So they suggested sending out a survey. So we worked with Mr. Engelhart, our statistics teacher at the high school, and had some kids work on this, college-level statistics students, I may add, some great kids. And they did a random sample of probable voters. So they pulled down voting data, and they sent a survey on a postcard out to 1,000 households in our community, okay? And they asked them 3 questions. First, they asked them where they lived. Do you live Nelson, Freedom, Hiram Township, or Get the Village, okay? Just to make sure we had an equal representation, and we had a pretty good representation. The second question they asked is, do you have kids in the schools currently? And that's the first graph I want to share with you here. 2/3 of the respondents, we had about a 10% response rate, which is extremely high for a survey of that nature. Extremely high. So 2/3 of the people who responded do not have kids in this district, which we thought may present how are we going to educate these individuals if we don't have their children, okay? The final question we asked them, and it reassured us of the support we have, but it really blew our socks off, and you'll see here. We explained to them that the committee's been together, we need new funds in November, we're looking for the most responsible way to do this. What would you be most likely to support? And we gave them 3 options. 1, traditional property tax. 2, an earned income tax. Or 3, I don't support either option. I would not support a levy. This is the breakdown. The blue is the earned income tax. You can see that was the clear winner. The orange was the traditional property tax, and the red was I do not support either. 85% of the people who responded to the survey supported one or the other issue. That was outstanding. That really gave us some great momentum that we felt like we still had that support. So at that point, the committee jumped into the foxhole of earned income tax and really, really looked into it. And these are the important pieces we want to share. Again, it's a new alternative that began in 2006. So people may ask, well, why didn't we do this the first time if it was the most responsible way? It wasn't available to us the first time. Just became available in 2006. Of the nearly 600 school districts in the state of Ohio, just about 200, 190 plus, have some type of income tax currently that range from 0.5% up to 2%. So we don't feel that we're on the bleeding edge here or the cutting edge. We feel that this is a proven method that works. The school districts that have used it have said that it's a viable way, it's sustainable and responsible. Earned income, this is really, really important. Earned income is applied to wages and self-employment income only. Earned wages and self-employment income only. It does not tax Social Security, pensions, dividends, IRA, annuities, interest, capital gains. Don't know how many of you are retired. I hope to be there someday. And at that point, if you're retired and you are on a fixed income, those would not be taxed. We have also learned that there is an Ohio small business deduction of $250,000. And small businesses should check with your tax preparer to make sure that you're set up to do this. But the first $250,000 of a self-reported income for a business is not taxable under a school district income tax. Okay? So small businesses would benefit. It is required through the state of Ohio to be deducted from your paycheck. So it's different, in that way it's different than a property tax. Property tax, you could either pay it into escrow and then you pay it with your monthly bill, and they take care of sending it to the county for you. But if you are like most people, you get your bill twice a year, your tax bill, and you pay that. School district income tax is a state tax, and it is actually pulled out of your paycheck each pay, required by your employer. The only caveat we have is, I know we have, I think, 2 mail carriers in here. The federal government is not required to withhold that. So we need to work with one of them to try to find out who do you call, like to talk about tax withholdings if you work for the federal government. There may be others, FBI, CIA. We probably wouldn't know about those people. But if you work for the federal government, a state cannot force the federal government to withhold a tax. And this is another important point of clarification. Only residents of the district pay a school district income tax. Only residents of the district. So if you work in the district but live someplace else, you do not pay that tax. Mrs. Conley, question? Everyone who's working will pay. 1.5% from each income.
You're going to want to look at it too in terms of when you do your taxes. This is on your adjusted gross income. So if you do have any deductions, that go through there, it would be on adjusted gross. But again, yes.
No, it's a great, the question was, what does an increase in taxes do to your community? And what I can tell you, Jackie, is this, is that I just presented to Rotary on Monday, and there was a realtor in there who brought up a great point. We had mentioned it in here, that when it comes to property taxes in this community, we're the lowest in Portage County. That attracts families. She was sharing that it's very difficult to keep a house on the market in this school district, that they're selling before they even go on the market. And people are moving in because of the schools. They want to come here because of the schools. Okay? So it keeps it relative to your home value, it's going to keep strong schools equate to strong home values. Okay? This issue will support us to be able to continue to have strong schools, which will in turn support strong home values, resale of your home value. Yeah, I think the best way to look at it, Jackie, would be look at districts that continue to fail levies and fail tax issues, and what happens to their property values and what happens to their enrollment. They continue to decline in home value, they continue to lose kids because they have to cut programming and students go elsewhere. So what have, relative to, so a community that has passed a school district income tax, what has it done to their property values?
Their property values and their people moving into it.
Yeah, we didn't look into that, but I'd be happy to look into it for you.
A number of them have passed it.
Yeah, and a number of those 190 have passed more than one. Good question. Right, so the question was, I think you said of the 190 that have passed, there are 40 that are 1.5 or higher, okay? And how did we come to that number? And we're just about to get there, I promise. We talk about that, and I think we're doing something that we haven't seen many districts do, which is latch more onto this and do a reduction on property tax. The number we need to get to, and I'll go back over here to the question about 4 members in a family. The dollar amount we need to raise is an additional $1.4 million annually. So whether we do that through if we were to have gone with property tax or with an earned income tax or a combination of the two, Rootstown is trying to do right now a combination of the two, that 1.4 would not change. The 1.4 is the 1.4 no matter whether you make the deposits in $5 bills or $2 bills. It's the 1.4 is the dollar amount that we need. When we looked at all of the data, average income, and one question that I know keeps coming up is, well, is that average income per household, per person? The most granular data that we can get does not go down to how many tax returns were filed at a house. It gives us the number of returns that were filed single, joint, head of household. So we took the best information that we had and said, what will impact the most number of people the least? So that's the strategy that the committee used. So when you talk about how did we get to the 1.5, this is where we get into that discussion. And please let me know if at the end this answers your question, okay? There are actually 2 lines here that are really important to look at, and that's the second one that says earned income. That would be the additional tax that would be asked in November. And remember, I asked you to put a pin in the renewal levy because we know that we need that. We know that we need that in addition to what we would ask, okay? So we brought a group in called PFR, Public Finance Resources, when before we made the decision, and asked them for additional help and said, look, we've come to a committee. The committee's made a recommendation based on input from the community for an earned income tax. We need your help doing 2 things. One, help us look at any rocks we haven't uncovered yet. Are there any savings that we haven't realized? They did that and said, the state audit said so. We looked at your books. There's no place else. You've cut to the bone. You're running efficiently. You just need more money. And then we asked them, help us run some scenarios of what the lowest ask would be. What's the least amount of money that we could ask for to help solve this problem? We started at 0.75, and I'm going to walk you through each of the scenarios here with that graph that we used initially to show you what that does. So this is our first scenario. They said, well, you could ask for 0.75% and renew the issue in 2019, okay? And as you can see here, that gets us there, but in 2020, we start levy planning again. Very quickly, we realized this. We've been off the ballot for 14 years. The last thing we want to do is ask for additional money in 2018, ask for renewal in 2019, and be right back on the ballot a year or 2 later asking for more. It was simply just not responsible to start at 0.75. So we kicked that off the table rather quickly. The next option is 1% and renew. And as you can see, in full disclosure, we were about ready to stop here because that got us where we needed to be. You can see that with the renewal and the new tax, which is the green, the blue is the renewal, the green is the additional 1%, that takes us out 10 years. It would keep us off the ballot for a minimum of 10 years. We were ready to take this option. And then we were asked to explore one more thing, and this is why. Does anyone know what just happened this year, Portage County Auditor? Property tax reappraisal. There was a county-wide reappraisal on property tax, on property values, okay? They're anticipating about a 10% increase on your property values. So let's take that and frame it into how we ask our community. With this scenario, we go to our community and say 1% Senior citizens, you will not see an increase in your, actually, district-wide, you will not see an increase in your property taxes. This will be solely based on your income. And what happens in January of 2019 because of the reappraisal, not because of what the schools did, but because of the reappraisal, property taxes increase. Then we have to go back to the voters in November of 19 and say, we need this renewal. And don't worry, your property taxes aren't going to go up. It's only a renewal. There was a major concern from PFR and the committee that we would really be running a risk of losing trust in saying this is not going to happen, and then it happens. Not because of something the schools did, but because of the reappraisal. So they presented one other option, and that was this. The third option, and I want to go back and forth a few times, which is the 1.5% earned income, but in conjunction with that, instead of renewing the property tax, reduce the property tax by 5.25 mils and not go back on the ballot even in 19. So do it once in November, remove that property tax, let it expire in 2019, and you can see, going back between the two, they get you to essentially the same place. So when we started to weigh the pros and cons of both options, the committee, the levy committee, made a unanimous decision, made a unanimous recommendation to go with option number 3. Because one, it got us to where we need, would keep us off the ballot for 10 years. That's our goal. Hopefully we can go even longer than that. And it reduces property taxes. Does not eliminate them, but reduces them by 5.25 mils. So the average taxpayer, the average salary, and again, getting back to that question, is it home or is it a single? Every situation's different. Some the 41,000 is a combined. Others, there are 3 people working in the house. Every situation is different, but to the average taxpayer, when you add the tax and reduce the average home value, it's a net increase of $370 per year. Every situation is going to be different. If the value of your home is more, you'll have more of a savings. If your income is more, you'll have more of a payment through the 1.5, okay? But it became very clear that this was the most responsible way, would impact the least number of people by reducing those taxes. One thing we haven't talked about is in 2023, the bond issue, which is 2.48 mils, 2.4 mils will come off. The bond issue that was put on to do the addition to the high school, the middle school, and the elementary comes off as well. So there'll be 2 reductions. So the question is, why 10 years? Ms. Knauer alluded to before the 5-year forecast. So when you look at that 5-year forecast that we're required to submit, we felt that it was very responsible for us to look at 2 full cycles and evaluate where we're at. It would get us 2 full cycles out, and before going back to the voters, we haven't been on in 14 years. If we can push that out as far as we can, we didn't want to make it permanent. We want the voters to have an opportunity to say, did it work or did it not work? And in 10 years, we would come back and ask that question, is where are we at now after 2 full 5-year forecast cycles? Does that help answer your question as to how we got to the 1.5? It's a very important question, and it was not one that we were considering until they shared what it would do to reduce property taxes, which further protects the lowest millage in the county. Oh. Well, so the question is, what percent of our population is retired and living on a pension? The data that we have is about 1/4 of our population, you included. So our conclusion, was that recommending the 10-year 1.5 earned income tax this November in conjunction with allowing that 5.25 mil property tax to fall off in 2019 was the most responsible way to go. It impacted the largest number of citizens in our community the least. And I want to go back to what we said about taxes. The first thing we learned is no one likes them. This is not an easy decision. This is something that we've done our homework. We've enlisted the help of the community to help us through and make sure we've uncovered every rock, looked at every situation, and our goal was to impact the largest number of people the least. It also removes some tax burden from those individuals in our community who do not have a way of increasing their revenue. They're on a fixed income, and taxing them did not seem to be responsible. And our goal, which is something that we really want to stick to, is to be off the ballot for a minimum of 10 years. We do not want to come back. That's one reason that we felt that we've been able to build this trust between the businesses and the schools and the parents, is working with the students, but also just making a nickel stand on its side is more ways than most. You know, we've been able to stretch this out as long as we can, and we'll continue to do that. This is how we felt this would be the most responsible way to do that. So what can you do to support? The first thing is doing exactly what you're doing tonight, is to get informed. When the information is not there, we've tried to present to every group that we could. We've been to the village. This morning, the Chamber of Commerce actually passed a resolution and voted in unanimous support of the issue. And we have the support of the local business through the chamber. But being informed is the most important thing. And if you have questions, some good questions, Jackie, we're going to look into what happened to the property values of those schools who have done this. What I can tell you is in short order, more and more schools are going this way. So I wouldn't imagine that they're following something that's not working. But we'll look into that for you. So if you have good questions like that, please call us and let us know. We're a phone call away. Stop into the office, let us know so that we can add them to the frequently asked questions. We have that document up on our Facebook page. There's a G-Men Unite Facebook page that's out there, a frequently asked question document that has all the charts and graphs there for you. We will be putting signs in yards when we're legally allowed to do that. I believe it's 30 days before the election. So if you'd like to have a sign in your yard to show support, we'll be able to help do that at no cost for you. Get active. We'll have voter IDs. We'll have vote walks. We'll have fundraisers before football games. We're trying to plan chili cook-offs on the front lawn that you can come in and have some food before a game, or make a financial donation to the G-Men Unite campaign. Chris Permy of Permy Financial Group is the treasurer, so you can make those directly to the G-Men Unite. Are there any questions that we didn't answer tonight?
The language in the ballot only refers to the 10-year income tax levy. The board made a decision not to ask for a renewal on the emergency levy. That is not reflected in the language. Legally, we can't do that. So.
So the question, if I heard it correctly, was, is there any guarantee that if this issue passes, that the 5.25 mils would come off? Is that the question? I can't see who asked it. I'm sorry. Just raise your hand. Oh, up in the dark. I'm going to let our board president answer that one. He votes.
So you're asking if the tax issue, the property tax issue will come off? Who's asking the question? Could you raise your hand? I'm sorry. I not only can't see, I can't hear. No, we said it's coming off. And that's our intent. That's what's going to happen. So we felt we didn't need, we're gonna do one or the other, and if we say it's gonna come off, it's gonna come off. We make tough decisions every day. And if we need to do other things, which we don't think we will, we think that this is really gonna help us level out the district for 10 years. And that's a,
So you're asking if pensions means all pensions. It means all pensions. Earned income is only taxed on income that you are earning now. Correct. It's going to say that it is an earned income tax levy. And I want to go back to the decision to not, or to let the emergency levy expire. I've been here since 2005. I love this district. This has been a great experience for me. And I want to stay here. I want to retire from here. We just had 3 people retire this year who spent their entire careers here at Garfield. The last thing we want to do is lose trust with the public. And I would have to say that, you know, looking at it from a perspective of what was the best way to go, we looked at it as 1.5% was the most responsible way, and let that tax issue expire. No. The question was whether we have to let the state know that we're going to let the levy expire. No. Basically, you missed the deadline and
so one of the questions, I don't know if this, I'm sorry.
Came through Facebook.
Came through Facebook. It says, what happens if this is not passed in November? Well, as every levy that's come up over the years, you have to make tough decisions. And we'll have to sit down and make tough decisions. That's just the way it works, because she can't sign off on a budget every year, and I have to sign off on it as well. And if we don't comply with what we say we're going to do, we could go to jail. I'm too old to go to jail. It's not going to happen. Yeah, yeah. And I'm sorry? Yeah, we probably have to, but we probably have to sit down, and because you have to start planning, and it's unfortunate, but then you'd have to run it like a real manufacturing business, and you'd have to start planning to make cuts, and you're just going to get deeper, and then you're going to lose kids, and you're going to lose programs, and it becomes, it's not a good thing, and it's nothing we've had to talk about for the last 14 years. So it's been pretty awesome. The community's been pretty awesome, actually. And one of the other things is what happens if it doesn't, if you start sliding and you don't do what you say you're going to do with the state. Then they throw you in fiscal caution, fiscal emergency, and then you get into a takeover situation. And that's really bad. I don't know if you guys ever read anything up on the Youngstown schools. It's not real pretty down there. The state appointed a CEO to take over their school district. And it's a mess. It's a real mess, and you don't want to go through that. We have too much pride for that. So, yes, ma'am. It would have been 8 mills instead of 5, and we would have gone back in 2 years.
We would have renewed. We would have had to renew.
We would have had to go back and renew again. And we would have had to go back. And that's something we don't want to do. we don't want to keep coming back every couple years. To me, it's not being fiscally responsible. Yes, ma'am. That would be an addition.
Tammy? Yeah, Tammy, it's a great question, and it's actually something that the state requires us to log. When a student leaves the district, there's a state information system that we have to code. Did they go to another community school? Did they attend a parochial school? You know, all of these myriad of reasons. One of the reasons is they moved out of state, and that's one of our highest reasons. And when we talk to some folks that have done that we've been close to and said, you know, why are they moving? Or we go down that list of students that we lose over the course of a year. And you say, gosh, where did that family go? They're following work. They're following work, and they're leaving the state for a job. So they're relocating. When we look statewide, there were only a few counties that saw a net population increase. Franklin County was one of them. Cuyahoga stayed about even. And help me, the county, Iva Walker would know it. Hamilton County and Cincinnati saw an increase. But relative to the other districts in Portage County, we didn't see nearly the drop that other school districts did when it comes to enrollment. We've seen a dip, but it hasn't been a huge drop like other districts have seen. So even though we're seeing a decline relative to what's going on around the state and in the region, we're staying pretty strong. And I think it's because of exactly what you mentioned. You know, we don't have fees. We do not have pay to participate for extracurriculars and sports. That is something that's a significant cost, and it's a service we offer. And we have all day, every day kindergarten at no cost for all of our students. Tammy, did that answer your question? Kristen? Yeah. I think go ahead.
So when we're looking at the 1.4 million, that is net of the renewal. So that is in addition. So the income tax itself is going to bring in about 2.3 million when we let the emergency levy expire. Somebody had asked about 8 mills. And for consistency, the average home value we're looking at is $155,000. Any new levies that come on the ballot for property tax no longer qualify for rollback. So it would be, the 8 mills would be $434 a year. $2.3, because we would have to go on for 8 mills in November and then come right back to you next November and ask for the renewal. By doing it this way, we're asking for 1.5% in November, and then we're not coming back, and we hope not to be back for 10 years. Correct.
So, and-
I may have to redo that in 2 years. But if we had chosen to do a property tax, the average home would pay about $400 and some dollars a year. So I was just asking that amount, so I can balance what I would pay in income tax versus what I would pay in property tax.
Right, and then you would have to take into consideration, so a 8 mills would be $434, and then whatever you're currently paying on the emergency levy portion of your property tax. Yep. Yeah, for reappraisal, correct. The question was also including the fact that we are in a reappraisal year in Portage County. Yeah. That happens every 3 years. Every 3 years, they do a book evaluation. Every 6 years, they do a full reval. This year is a full reval for us. Okay, so the question is, how it affects, people from a personal perspective when you look at your situation, and, maybe it affects more people if we go for a property tax, but people who are making more money are going to be affected more by an income tax. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, where did that average taxpayer? It actually comes from the federal government. It's data that you can download. It's from 2015. It's the most recent data that they have released. Yes, and it is the earnings, the filed adjusted gross income amount for all filers in the 44231 zip code, and it shows all the joint, all the head of household, and all the single filers. Well, when you're looking at the average household, and the question is, what if that number's higher, and what would we do with the additional funds? The funds that we're asking for are not based on that figure. What the state does is the state looks at all of the income tax returns that were filed for adjusted gross income, and they designate traditional, like all income versus earned income, and they are the ones that give us that dollar amount. In fact, they gave us the figures for the state of Ohio and totals, not by household, totals for the state of Ohio and for James A. Garfield School District, which includes our entire district area, not just 44231 zip code. And they gave it for the past 20 years, past 30 years. Yeah, so everything that we do with that dollar amount it's certified by the Department of Taxation through the state of Ohio. And going back to looking at the property tax versus the income, and if you do make more money, it is going to affect you differently than somebody who makes less, or a senior citizen who is not going to be paying that. But it is a source of pride for us that our property taxes are so low in this school. The history with school funding is to go for property tax. And I think that Chris Permy said it today. If you were to pick your house up in Garrettsville and go drop it down in Solon, you're going to pay 2 times what you're paying in property tax. Or if you drop it in Aurora, they're on the ballot a lot, and they want to achieve things for their students, and they're going out, and people are passing levies, and they're spending a lot on property tax. We've been very good at, like Ted said, making a nickel stand on its side, and we don't want to ask for any more than we need, but we want to continue to do great things. And public education has become a competition. With more and more people leaving Northeast Ohio and more options open to students, you see College Credit Plus, where students can leave your campus and they can go and take college classes. And then they're not here, and you pay for that through the state. It's something that the state get billed for. Whereas if we do those college classes in the high school, we keep the kids here. And we have our teachers. Our teachers have worked to get certified to teach these college classes. I mean, we're working to offer the most opportunities we can to our students and give them the best opportunities. And we want to keep doing that. And I think that people want to be here. People want to come here. I mean, that's shown in the open enrollment. We're a great school district, and more people, want to be part of that. So, yes.
Yes. That's correct. Yeah. So the question was, so everyone can hear that's out there on the stream, is, so if 25% of our community is retired, and does that mean that the other 75% are picking up that and paying a little more because they're making a little more? Wouldn't it be easier to pass a property tax that's spread to all property owners? And to answer your question, I'm going to go back to the data that Tracy shared. One of the pieces of data from the Department of Taxation that she mentioned we got from the IRS, the federal government, from 2015, Dan, was it broke down all of those returns and looked at the percentages, the total number of returns, the total adjusted gross income. You divide those two numbers, it gives you the average. But it also broke it down into income categories, which was very, very helpful in our decision. When you look at the average home value of $155,000, and you continually apply, Kristen, like you were mentioning, that property tax to it. Every time we would turn a corner and apply a millage to the average household, we would turn around and say, okay, to raise that exact same amount district-wide, how many people, now we're actually looking at people, how many people would be impacted because that data was broken down by category of wage earners that filed an income tax return of $1 to $25,000, $25,000 to $50,000, $50 to $75,000, $75,000 to, I believe, $150 was the next, I'm sorry, to $100. Then once they got over $100, it went $100 to $150, and then over $200. Folks, the least amount of people impacted are with the income tax. It impacts the least amount of people. It impacts them the least, impacts the greatest amount of people the least. When you look at and we could post that up on the FAQ, I think it would be very helpful for you to see the sheer number of people filing tax returns in our community for less than $50,000. You'll be surprised the number that are filing for less than $25,000 a return. It's a significant number of people. So essentially, to answer your question, every turn we looked at, whether it's property tax or earned income or that combination of earned income tax and reducing property, that impacted the largest number of people the least. And I'll go back to what Tracy said. We offer a great product here. Costs have gone up, and we feel that this is the most responsible way to do it, and we're not asking for anything more than what we need to continue to do what we're doing. There's one more question in the back. Yeah, the question was, would the earned income tax start in 2019? The answer is yes. January of 2019. What we have talked about is the tax issue committee that's been meeting. They would like to set aside money that they fundraise to send a communication out to all community members on a postcard, should the issue pass, that reminds everyone, this is your school district code. You need to let your employer know that you are in a school district that has an earned income tax so that they can begin withdrawing that. Does that answer your question? Jackie?
It's on your adjusted gross. So like somebody who has self-employment, like a joint return, if you have a loss on self-employment, it offsets. You go down to your joint return, adjusted gross. Well, it's similar to how you file through. Okay, the question was, it's determined on the year versus each payday. So it's the same way you're going to do with the state of Ohio. This is a state of Ohio tax. So you get to fill out another form at the end of the year. It's not that bad. I pay 1% in Berkshire. Basically what it is reporting your adjusted gross income. And then like the state of Ohio, if you overpaid, there would be a refund. But the reconciliation comes at the end of the year when you file that tax form.
You know, and Jackie, to go back to your question about what does it do to home values and what does it do to the community if you pass, I can tell you that probably the closest example that we have to us would be Berkshire. And what I can tell you is Berkshire just went through a merger. Ledgemont closed and merged with Berkshire. I can assure you that the district in worse financial shape did not take on the district that merged. And so the other thing I can tell you is that Berkshire just passed an issue in their community to support their schools by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. So I haven't spoken to that superintendent or staff personnel, but based on what I know about that district, I would say that it's a very strong community when it comes to the schools. I think we had another question I saw pop up. Denise? Right, so the question is, getting back, I want to make sure I'm getting your question right here, Denise. So if 25% are not impacted at all, 25% are not impacted at all because they're senior citizens, they're retired, how does that go into impacting the most number of people? And it comes down to income, the income level of those individuals who are working. And I think it would be very helpful for you to see that breakdown of each of those categories that I talked about, the $1 to 25, 25 to 50, and you start to see the number of returns that were filed in those areas. We had someone reach out to us that asked us a question very early on, and the question was, how much am I going to have to pay? I make over $200,000 in my household. How much will I have to pay? We gave them the dollar amount, and we said, well, there's good news, bad news. The bad news is this is what you're going to have to pay, and we gave them 1.5% of $200,000. The good news is there were only 29 other people in this school district who earned that much. Out of over 3,000, 29. So when you look at the breakdown of the income, very, very few are very high wage earners. A significant number, Denise, are in those lower tiers. So when we applied those averages, that was the most responsible way to go. Impacted the most number of people the least. Yeah, and Denise, when you also look at the 1% and renewing has a certain impact. It impacts everyone, even our senior citizens continue to pay. But when you factor in that when you do 1.5 and pull off or allow to expire the emergency levy, that has a positive impact on every individual. And when you look at the number of wage earners versus the number of homeowners, there's this kind of discussion about spreading it out. How do we spread it out? And there are more wage earners than there are homeowners. So that is a way of spreading it out even more. When you look at individuals that rent, and a lot of times those costs are passed back to the renter over time. If you have a unit that you rent and your property taxes go up, you may pass those back on. But that may not be immediately. But immediately, if those folks are working and renting, they are paying. Does that answer your question, Denise? I want to make sure. Okay. Jim?
It's based off of your state income tax return. The filing is fairly similar to what you do with your state income tax return, and since it is a state tax, you do file it through the state of Ohio. So all the same rules that would apply to your income when you use, and in most cases I don't do taxes, but when I do my own, your federal adjusted gross comes over and is pretty much your Ohio adjusted gross. I'm sure there's other people have certain scenarios that may be different. But.
Any other questions? I think we've exceeded the appropriate wait time for questions here. And I want to thank you for your questions. They're good. And again, this is not, it's not easy to come to you and ask this. What we can assure you is that it wasn't Tracy and I or the school board and I sitting in a back room saying, what's the best way to do this? This has been 9 months of, I keep using the analogy of uncovering rocks and essentially just looking at, is there anything we can do? Are there any more fundraisers? Are there any more grants? Are there any, and the answer is no. The answer is we've come to the end of a rope. And we need the community's support now more than ever to continue to be an attractive district to young families, to continue to offer great services to the families that we have here. It's the reason a lot of you, I know many of you personally, I live here. This will impact me. Our board lives here. We know this will impact them. This is going to impact all of us. It's not an easy ask. But I can tell you with 100% confidence that we feel that this is the most responsible way to do it. And we feel that one thing that's very important to us is to ask and to not have to do this again for a decade. Typical levy cycles in school districts are between 4 and 6 years, 4 and 7 years. We've more than doubled that, and we want to continue to do that. It's very important for us to focus on educating our kids and not asking our community for money. So that's why we do what we do. We're about the kids here. If you have any questions for us, we'll be happy to stick around and ask them. We know this is a very personal issue. We know this applies very differently from one family to another. I wish that we could come up with a campaign that would that would answer every single question right out of the gates, but we've uncovered a lot of questions. We know it's very specific, and we'd be able to help you work through that. Would really like to talk to the postal workers to figure out how that works, working for the federal government, because they work differently than anyone else. So, thank you so much for coming this evening. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.